the way we delivered education was like, those are the rules. This is what you must do in order to succeed in this course. A, B, C, and D. That's it. No rationale more so than say, this is the content, those are the assessments, and trust me, they're related to one another. Uh, and it's due by such a date, because when you are in the real world, you're going to have do things due by such a date, and that's the end of the story. Now it's more like understanding that it's kind of a lose-lose approach. The instructor trying to enforce those things without looking around at who's in the room and what are their needs, is just banging their head against the wall and making even their own lives more complicated. So from where I sit, that's the angle that we take, is how, having a different approach to delivering your content, because that's essentially how a lot of us think of ourselves as instructors. How a different approach, a more flexible approach, will serve your students, but will really serve you too. It will make your life less stressful, and you won't have as many emails to reply to when asked for an extension, and so on and so forth. So from where I stand, it's always about what's in it for me, the instructor, that will also serve the students. And that's kind of like our entry point, I think, for a lot of that.
Yes, because I do want us to talk about the often contrary, conflictual, or difficult square to circle issue of caring for student wellness, caring for whole students.
Yeah.
We don't feel cared for as whole
That's
humans, right, as instructors. So I do want to pull on that. But first and foremost, this term flexibility, because this is another set of discussions I'm having with a variety of different people in different roles and responsibilities, some supporting instructors, some supporting students, some at the strategic administrative level, all around technology and flexibility. Okay. So technology, again, is one of those things that has been touted as being, and it's, to a large degree, accurately, that it can offer these flexible pathways to learning, right? So you mentioned the word commute. For example, you could take an online course, you could cut your commute. Maybe you don't come to campus every week. Maybe you come to campus twice a week, so on and so forth. There's lots of different ways that students can take courses. It's like modes of delivery, as we call them.
Yeah.
And flexibility is the word that's often used, whether it's hybrid, blended, high flex, whatever. Now, one of the things that's coming out in the research that we're doing in around some of these models is that students are not necessarily making the most informed decisions around learning. Like we are human beings, and we have cognitive apathy. We have, we're quite lazy as neurobiological beings, because we are trained internally and biologically to conserve our energy so that we survive, right? Our chances of survival are higher. So it's not innate for most people to push themselves. That's why we have to push ourselves out of comfort zones, Genevieve. We don't jump out of comfort zones. So without properly equipping students with the understanding or skills to be able to choose what pathway and what kind of flexibility actually they need, at times, increased level of flexibility of that technology is affording is actually more around convenience. Like,
right, for sure.
I don't know if I need it. I don't want to do it. So I'm going to do it this way, because this way seems easier.
Totally. I mean, I see this at work every day. I see this with the audience that we serve every day too. Like this idea that, for instance, in-person learning, as long as you're a learner, I'm not necessarily talking about an undergraduate student here. The quality of the learning experience, a lot of people still feel that there's value to the in-person, but if presented with the option to do the online thing, well, there's so much convenience and a lot of good intention around that, until you get to that point and you're like half engaged, or not as perhaps not forming the same relationships for sure, right? And for me, learning is relational, really, at the core. So if you don't have that, it's a very lonely experience. And yeah, the wall is going to agree with you 100% with what you're saying, right? Or your cat, or So but at the same time, I feel like we haven't, as a system, as an educational system, haven't reached the point where we have our stuff together, where we also have been able to say as a program, this is how we want this program to roll out. We understand flexibility is important both for students and instructors. We understand that some things are better learned in person, say a lab where there's some tactile experience, and or we really want to build community, and we feel like in person is going to provide that better. Although it's also possible to create an online community if also designed with intention, right? But if we just pull things together here and there because it's convenient, because it sounds good, because it's different, because it's this or that, then it's not very necessarily coherent. And students are not, I guess, I don't know, because I don't interact with students directly very much these days, but my assumption is that if there's no rhyme or reason to it, they're not also thinking in terms of what makes most sense for me in this particular instance. They don't have that sort of, intuitive knowledge to go on, other than to say, well, I can't make it to campus because I work from 9 to 12, and then I have a class at 1. And so that's, of course it's important, but it shouldn't be the only way to think this through.
No, and that those skill sets, those reflective skill sets, and the same as with instructors. I think so. This is exactly where we're at right now. And for most people in our industry, and this idea of systems change and culture shifts, it can be very frustrating to be in this place, which I totally understand. But I also find it incredibly inspiring because we've unmade a bunch of stuff. And I know we're going to make another COVID reference, even though we're not, but really a bunch of stuff was exposed. A lot of cracks became chasms during the COVID pandemic. And the introduction of technology in this really, I want to say meaningful way, but it's not meaningful. It's like in a really like a big way. We have a bunch of things are changing our expectations, for one, about even like coming to campus, whether we're administrative workers, instructors, or students. Like we've gotten so used to not even being in face-to-face environments. So how, with all these things that have changed, all the pieces of a puzzle, it's like you've shaken a puzzle and the pieces are all over the table. And I couldn't agree with you more that, in my opinion, the important next step is, as institutions, as systems of education, whichever one you find yourself in or system you're working in, to intentionally rebuild that puzzle, selecting pieces with purpose and with meaningful intention into some sort of a cohesive puzzle that you can look at and show people and then clearly communicate the value of. Like, this has been designed this way. And then again, not to say that at this juncture, because everything is kind of all over the table, these pieces are all over the table, we do have to be, again, compassionate with ourselves as systems change agents, because we might put together a picture and try it out and find it. There are some pieces missing still. We do have to take that piece out and put another piece in. We're not meant to get it right away. But the point is that this process of iteration is now at a strategic systems level, where at the program level, the department level. So I want to zoom us out even that. So we took you to the administration level. Let's zoom you out one more and ask you another question, General, that you're not going to like. How's it going? How's it going in the systems change world, Genevieve? What do you think?
Oh my God.
Because you were part of these discussions at that level of whatever ivory tower you work in, where decision makers are having these conversations about what's next.
Right.
How do we move forward with intention around some very key elements? They're not necessarily saying down in the mesosphere, here in the mesosphere where we're working in the administrative capacity, we talk about tangible teaching and learning changes like a growth-based, process-oriented approach. We talk about socio-emotional learning and compassionate and caring teaching and all of that. At the systems level, I feel like the conversations are around, how do we use technology effectively? How are we defining and measuring success around our assessment practices now? They can be different. They're different conversations. They're all connected.
Yeah.
How do you feel we're doing at the administrative level up there? Systems change level.
It's such
Let's go. Opportunities, challenges.
Yeah.
What do you think is opportunity? What is going well? What do you see as like oh my gosh, this conversation has never really happened at this level before. I can see it happening. That's a potential opportunity for moving forward with this puzzle, this rejig of our puzzle pieces.
So maybe I want to start answering this question by giving an example, and hopefully it will get me started in a productive way. But so at our institution right now, or very recently, there was a suggestion that maybe we need to pause classroom retrofitting for HyFlex delivery, because essentially we're not sure this is going well, right? So I think there was the promise of HyFlex, and it still exists, but it does require a lot of intentionality. It requires, in my opinion, sort of a principled approach to how we're going to deliver this, as opposed to sort of like just using the technology because it's in the room, type of thing. And so to me, I think I haven't seen that a lot, and maybe it's just a matter of my own experience. I don't know, but like an institution willing to say, you know what, we've tried this for a couple of years. We thought it was very promising and we're not sure anymore. So let's pause and think this through. At least I'm hoping that's the next step, is kind of like think this through, right? So that gives me a little bit of hope, I think, in terms of how institutions might be able to respond in a more principled way to how content is delivered by and large at university. So to me, also, I have been struggling with HyFlex in particular, because it was a certain thing before the pandemic, and it was really, I thought, a robust model that was then kind of diluted into, how to offer synchronous in-person and online delivery at the same time. And that's such to me, it has been, for the most part, a mechanism by which we have re-emphasized, or what's the word, kind of when we've gone back to old models of teaching, delivering content, because HyFlex is really hard to do any other way. So in some ways, although the technology has given us a bit of an edge, at the way it was implemented kind of made us go backwards a little bit, which is a big contradiction. So I'm happy that we're like, okay, let's think this through. I don't know what the reasons are behind the pause, and let's think this through. It might be very instrumental again, and the investment required, and sort of like the impetus for institutions to be back in person 100% of the time for economical reasons more so than anything else. I don't know, but I like the fact that we're pausing and rethinking what because it gives us, people like us in the teaching and learning area, and a window or an opportunity to weigh in and say, well, from a pedagogical perspective, maybe those are the different things that we can also think about as we move forward. So I don't know.
No, I think you're very right. And I think it offers us this opportunity. It's space. And I don't care, a yoga teacher once said to me that, I remember it was like early in my yoga, experiential career, as it were, which is now in, 2.5, 3 decades. But this idea of, I was frustrated that there were all these people coming to a yoga class that seemed to be there just for the workout, just for like the tight butt, and not for the principles and practice of mindfulness.
Right.
And the instructor said to me, they were like, listen, it doesn't matter why people are coming to the yoga class. Like, if they want to come for the tight butt, that's fine, because they're going to hear people talk in a way, they're going to be cued to breathe in a way, they're going to be, whether or not they came for it or not, exposed to different ways of thinking and being. Even how much that goes in is none of our concern. So often, something that I found very frustrating early on in systems change work was it did come down to money. It so often always comes down to money.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing. It doesn't need to cause me frustration, because to your point, it gives us a window. It can give us an opportunity or a foundation for an argument if something is cost saving or profit generating, right? It gives me an idea as to what matters to decision makers, which then I could use potentially to my pedagogical favor, should I so choose later. Do you ever get disillusioned doing work in systems change where you do get that narrative so much that it's not always about, so rarely in fact is about, the teaching and learning, the quality of teaching and learning?
Some days I feel like, I keep banging my head against the wall too. But then I'm reminded, somebody made a reference to her hula hoop one time to me, and I find this metaphor so helpful, because really, when I'm trying to do what I think what we're all trying to do, imagine that we all have an invisible hula hoop around our hips, and we're trying to keep it moving, right? And whatever is within it is what I control. Whatever is outside of it is none of my concern, to use your phrase. And so I often go back to that image, because essentially there is very little that I can control, but I have control over some things, like the programming that we offer, the quality that we offer, and the conversations that we're having with individual professors, and all of these things. I can see that they're making, I'll use the word impact. I would say that I'd rather say that they matter. Those things matter. And what they're not going to get to systems change anytime soon, but that's what I can do in my corner. And when I focus on that, I'm happy, because if that one conversation with one professor really makes a difference for them, then it will make a difference for their students, right? And so maybe that means that these students will have a special time, or a meaningful experience in that course with that professor, and we all remember that, right? So yeah, it doesn't get to the systems level, but I think also, sometimes we have those teaching and learning conversations sort of in a vacuum, trying to work around aspects of the system that will not change whatever we do. So the massification of education is not going to go away. The need for institutions to access funding is not going to change. The large classrooms are not going to change. If you ask me, that's where you got to start. You got to, start from scratch and get rid of those massive courses where you have hundreds and sometimes thousands of students. If you really mean it when you say that education matters and that we are educating critical minds for the future, like, to me, those things are what's the word?
Irreconcilable.
Thank you. So I feel like, honestly, sometimes I feel like um, we're very naive because our ideals, to me, are unattainable when you consider the reality of higher education is today. So what can I do then? If that's not going to change, and we all know it won't, I can either go work for one, kind of fringe liberal arts college somewhere in the US, probably, in New England somewhere, I don't know, or the West Coast, somewhere there, and where there's no grades, where classrooms are small, where students pay probably a fortune to attend, and so on and so forth. Or I can stay here at York or an institution like York, where I also believe that everybody deserves an education, and that it will have to be in the system in which it is in which we operate. And then my job becomes more about sort of inspiring one instructor at a time, and because I know that they also inspire their students, and they will touch their lives in some way, and those students can leave York with those experiences close to their heart, and kind of move along. So that's kind of how I see the impact I can have. I'm not sure that systems change is really something that I'm into, and because I really don't believe that it's a bit sober news here, but I really don't believe that change is possible.
In certain areas, yeah. Like some of the things.
It pains me to say it.
No, and it's through experience, and it's interesting because I would classify as that work in the microcosm. If you think of microcosm, mesosphere,
That's right.
Like there are different levels of impact in a system, right? So absolutely, you could work in different layers of things going on.
Right.
If you want to work in the registration field, for example, forget it. I feel like that
for sure.
I am never working in registration. Figuring out how to square the circle of, flexible registration and attendance in higher ed with the government grants. Right. My goodness. But I love the hula hoop metaphor. And I love that idea. It was the ancient Stoic Epictetus who said, who knows how many years ago, that we have things within our sphere of control. It's just not what you want them to be. It's not what you think they are, and it's not what you want them to be. They're often much smaller. They're much more, close to home. And much of it involves your own thoughts, behaviors, actions, decisions. Mm-hmm. So I really think that there is an incredible value. You're so articulate, and what you've been able to share around how you approach the work that you do in teaching and learning, both within a system that is broken and will remain broken, but how you maintain and persevere in an effort to make the change that is possible in spaces where you see it as possible, where you can, as you say, work to influence quality of programming, quality of conversation. I think that these are exactly the kinds of messages that people need to hear, because no system, whether you're working in a company or a public sector institution or a primary school or a community center, no system is without its cracks and chasms. No system is beyond the need to be financed,
right,
to run, right? So many of us in our own personal context are facing that same kind of challenge in terms of some of these things are broken and they're not going to get fixed. But, and I love your term, the massification of education, because the massification to me is a paycheck, right? That's one of the reasons, we get paid per student. So the massification of education, that was for a reason. And in the time of budget crunches and current fiscal times, we're not cutting class sizes. So, but to your point, if we focused only on the kinds of teaching and learning changes that we could make that would be more boutique, more smaller class sizes, right? If we only thought that authentic assessment practices were possible in a 20 or 30 student classroom, if we didn't consider how to impact in whatever way possible the teaching and learning experiences in this massification context, then we could go nuts. We'll drive ourselves crazy.
For sure.
So I really appreciate your insights, Genevieve. I think they're incredibly valuable, not only to our listeners, but to me personally. Your perspective around how to stay sane in this work, as I've said to you multiple times, has been incredibly valuable to me. And I know that you have helped me frame challenges in more digestible ways, where I don't feel I'm hitting my head against a wall. I feel like I'm going towards a wall, but then I stop. I can see the wall coming.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait. Don't do it. Don't
45-degree turn, right?
Port side. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your incredible, valuable expertise and insights with everybody today. And I know whatever teaching and learning environment you come to, and whatever role, whether it's parent, administrator, or educator, you're gonna improve the systems that you work in. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, thank you. It's always amazing to talk to you, because I do feel like it's, how am I going to put this? I feel like when I think about these things, it's just my own thoughts around a bunch of things that don't amount to much. But the way you summarize everything, I'm like, oh, okay, I need to use that phrase next time. So it's always helpful, in other words, to my earlier point about relational learning, to dialogue with people and bounce ideas and see how, one's perspective really, how it fits in a larger sort of perspective or even philosophy sometimes. Because when it's another, doing this job without those opportunities for conversation would be extremely frustrating. But then we realize that we have shared experiences in many ways, and that they amount to something coherent, So
absolutely. And all the more reason why we believe it's by having these types of experiences where that reiterate to me the importance of having them in the classroom, whatever that classroom looks like, right? Yeah. I at 42 years old, having this conversation alters my, expands my perspective, encourages me to consider, the ideas in new ways. And if there is one thing that I think every human being should be afforded, is spaces and places where that can take place. That's if that's not what education, we spent all those years in these spaces and places, we might as well make use of them, Genevieve, and have these kinds of constructive dialogues. So really good reminder in terms of why we do this work as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. The Education Revolution podcast is produced in-house by community members, and I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Sangera. Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and head over to my website to opt in for my newsletter for more ways to connect with some of these big ideas.